11:17 on TSN 690. It is game night OT, excuse me. Knew I was going to do that at some point. Game Points is my show at midnight. This is game night OT. You can see how I could be confused. We are going to talk some Olympic hockey here in this segment, and that music usually means one thing. We're going to chat with our buddy John Hoven from mayorsmanor.com, also Mayor NHL on twitter.com. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. It's like a double night of mourning, though. I don't think I've talked to you since the Super Bowl, so we have to mourn the Broncos, and then, of course, CM Punk being out, we have to mourn him as well.
Oh, man. It stinks, I tell you. It stinks. Now, John, you sent me a message on Twitter privately, and it is correct. The current TSN690.ca feed outside of our, geolocation is disabled throughout the Olympics due to rights and all that kind of stuff. So my apologies for your regular listeners, but we will certainly put this segment on our site, so they'll be able to hear it potentially tomorrow afternoon.
No problem.
How you doing?
I'm doing outstanding. You know, this Olympic tournament is just great. I'm a huge fan of international hockey, and having had the privilege to go to the Olympics in 2002 in Salt Lake and 2010 up in Vancouver, and also the World Cup in 2004, it takes me back to those great tournaments there, and really enjoying it and looking forward to these games coming up here. Now,
obviously, we have the brackets. They're set. They're ready to go. We have, obviously, Latvia against Canada, and certainly the U.S. will battle the Czech Republic, and should they both win, they'll show up in the semifinals and do battle. Your thoughts on the USA-Czech Republic matchup? The Czechs may be starting to find their game a little bit.
The Czechs are. You're absolutely right, and that could be a concern, of course, for Team USA. I don't think this is going to be an easy game by any stretch, but I do believe that Team USA has been the most complete team in the tournament, so far. It's a small sample size, obviously, but the entire tournament is a small sample size. But starting in net, with Jonathan Quick, the best goaltender in the National Hockey League, starting for Team USA, finding his rhythm, playing well. But the team has looked balanced, complete, both offensively and defensively. I know that people there in Toronto would disagree with me when I say this, but for my money, the MVP for Team USA thus far has been Ryan Kesler from the Vancouver Canucks. I just think he's been outstanding. We've seen the absolute best Ryan Kesler that we've seen in quite some time. And it's taking nothing away from, of course, Phil Kessel and the goals that he scored and those sorts of things, or the heroics of TJ Oshie in the shootout. But I just think when you talk about a complete player at both ends of the ice and that's contributed pretty much every shift of every game, I think you'd be hard-pressed to argue against Ryan Kesler. So I think the U.S. has certainly a good opportunity to advance in that game.
Chatting with John Hoven from mayorsmanor.com. Who's the underrated guy right now for Team USA, if there is such a thing because of the star power? But is there a guy that you expect to start to maybe look for in that matchup against the Czechs to break out?
Well, we haven't really seen or heard from Zach Parise. I mean, you can joke. Is he even in Sochi? I'm not sure. You would expect more from him. Patrick Kane's been unbelievable, along with along with Kessler and Kessel, like we spoke about a moment ago. But a guy who's maybe flown a little bit under the radar, and actually his line mate as well, of course, talking about the Kings captain Dustin Brown, but really David Backes. He's a guy who seems to thrive in these environments. He's played well defensively. He's set a couple of his teammates up, but it wouldn't surprise me at all to see Backes have a real breakout game, and that's saying a lot because those two guys, Brown and Backes, they play a similar game. They're grinders, they're bangers, they're power forwards. They're not guys who are going to go out and score a hat trick. But that being said, you get that feeling when you watch David Backes that it might be in him, and you could see him start to do something here and have a breakout game. I don't think he's going to go on a roll and rattle off a ton of goals over a period of games, but he certainly can have one big game in him here offensively.
All right, elsewhere, Canada will play Latvia. Your thoughts? I mean, we obviously don't talk a lot of international hockey regularly on this program or throughout the year, but that's a pretty big win for Latvia over Switzerland. A lot of people were thinking that the Swiss were maybe on the rise with some of the great NHLers now coming out of that country.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it was. I think Canada really dodged a bullet and could have put a serious dent in any medal hopes that they had, or even for a matchup with Team USA in the semifinals, having to play that Swiss team. They only gave up they only gave up one goal through the first three games. They weren't generating a lot of offense, but then again, Canada was having their own troubles with offense. And, just listening to Canadian radio, since the tournament has started, it's been a nonstop debate about the line combinations and who's going to play with Crosby and what about Jeff Carter and what do you do with Kunitz and Marty St. Louis and on down the line. Canada has not played a complete game yet here where you get really excited and think, okay, this is the team. Now, they can do it against Latvia, but that's, with all due respect, and when people say that, there's usually not a lot of respect coming, but with all due respect, Latvia is not one of the top-tier teams. You want to see them try to generate a big win against somebody before they have to go up against that balanced U.S. team potentially in the semifinals. So I do think that Canada, of course, they're heavily favored to beat this Latvia team, but it's the beauty of a one-and-done type tournament when you get into these situations. A fluky goal here or there. Just imagine if Latvia goes up early in that game, say in the first 5 minutes, and they're up 1-0. All of Canada will be holding their breath, and those players will be gripping their sticks pretty tight.
John Hoven joining us here on Game Night OT. John, looking at Sidney Crosby, everyone's got a theory as to what's going on with chemistry and not scoring and all that kind of stuff. Where do you weigh in on production for him and 2010 all outside of the golden goal, same kind of thing? What is it about this ice and this tournament that maybe is a little befuddling to some of the best players in the world?
Well, you're talking about two entirely different tournaments. The tournament in 2010 up in Vancouver was played on NHL regulation size ice, and you absolutely, pretty much, I absolutely can't compare what's happening over in Sochi, although there are some interesting comparisons, not only with Crosby, but what about the other guy who for years has been argued as the best player in the game, in Alexander Ovechkin? Had a very disappointing 2010 up in Vancouver, was heavily criticized for it, took him a good while to come out of that slump afterwards mentally, and we've seen him over the last year or so really elevate his game back up to where he once was. And then you look at this tournament, and outside of the goal he scored in the first game, he's been pretty much a non-factor for that Russian team. So whether you're talking about Crosby, whether you're talking about Ovechkin or any individual player, I would say this, and it sounds like a tired cliche, but it's a team game. So at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter how many goals Crosby scores. It's wonderful for the fantasy, hockey honks out there. But at the end of the day, what they're looking for is they're looking for wins. And so if Crosby goes the entire, tournament and never scores a goal, but Canada somehow comes out with the gold medal, isn't that really a win for the entire country?
I agree with you. I have no problem with it. It's the same situation with people in the city red hot mad that PK Subban's not been in the lineup, and I'm getting some heat on Twitter about it. I'll probably read out some of those tweets next, but it's amazing to me how people
might be
are
a little bit of a different situation.
No,
though,
but I don't think it is though, John. So the situation with Team Canada is that they have a lot of depth on that right side, and if you're going to keep PK in the lineup, who are you going to pull out? Drew Doughty, Peter Angelo. I mean, it's crazy to me how people are just absolutely irate that he's not in the lineup when sometimes he'll make a mistake here or there, and it's a situation where you got to trust a guy like Mike Babcock to make the right call.
Well, look, there's strength in numbers. So the fact that PK plays in Montreal, certainly is helping his case to have a rabid fan base that's arguing the point. If he was playing in a smaller market, say a Calgary or an Edmonton, while there would be some noise, there wouldn't be nearly the national noise that there is because of the market that he plays in. Very similar to if a guy was, playing in Toronto, and the noise that would be generated there. In terms of who you're going to pull out, I can remove one name from that list. You're not taking Drew Doughty out of there. In 2010, he was arguably the best player for Team Canada at the Olympics, and you could certainly make the same argument this time around again as well. So I don't think he's the guy, but I do think this. I think that PK is the reigning Norris Trophy winner. I don't put a lot of stock in people that were MVPs or were stars 4 years ago. This is a guy who was the reigning Norris Trophy winner and was deserving of that. And Canada's game has seemed to be a little bit off. So, maybe you put him in there as one of the extra guys, and even if you tighten up his game a little bit and don't give him the normal minutes that he would get, but you get him in there on the power play and things like that, it could have been something that would jumpstart the offense. So while I don't think it's the end of the world, and certainly, as you mentioned, Canada's going to hyper overanalyze every single move,
That's right.
I do think that one is probably deserving of some conversation.
Look, it's definitely deserving of conversation. I don't know if it's deserving of the ire that the brass of Yzerman and Babcock are facing, particularly when they knew what they were doing in 2010. The other thing too is it's great to get all these tweets making fun of me because they're putting in guys like Hamhuis and Vlasic, and I have no problem with it. But you can't have 8 different players or 7 different guys on that defensive core that play the same game. You got to have some variety, and not only that, but we're talking about a team here that has fourth liners that have 70, 80 points in the NHL. I mean, this is ridiculous to think that PK Subban is going to solve all the offensive problems.
Look, you can't go wrong with starting anybody that made Team Canada. As everybody knows, there's a whole other group of guys that could have formed a second team that would have been more than competitive, in this tournament. So you can't go wrong with any of the lineup. And you mentioned earlier relying on, a coach that's as knowledgeable as a guy like Mike Babcock, and who's been as successful as he has. You have to rely on him and allow him to make the moves. But, that's just really what Twitter boils down to, and these other social media outlets. Everybody wants to weigh in with their opinion. And I don't know what it is that's caused people to go crazy in the last month, but in the weeks leading up to the tournament, whether you're talking about trade rumors or whether you're talking about moves made at the Olympics, guys making rosters, guys not making rosters, it's just absolutely unbelievable. It seems to me that I'm inundated on a daily basis with people that are freaking out about the smallest thing. So I don't know what's going on. We must be in a perpetual full moon, or the water system here in North America is just, polluted or something. I don't know what it is.
MayorsBanner.com, a great website for hockey, and of course Mayor NHL as well on Twitter to follow John. And this segment again will be available on GamePointsRadio.com. John, enjoy the action tomorrow. Should be a lot of fun. We'll talk to you very soon. Maybe even on our Sunday afternoon show, perhaps.
Hey, here's the deal. Team USA is going to go up against Sweden for the gold medal, and don't be surprised if you see Finland beat Russia in that game as well.
Ooh, all right. I like it. We'll play that again on Sunday, and you'll be wrong.
Talk to you soon.
It is Game Night OT here on TSN 690.